Yeah. So today I found out this interesting song. I found it in this book by Vipul Rikhi, uh, One Palace, a Thousand Doorways. So he has translated many songs from folk traditions, many Kabir songs also, and other mystics into English. And this is very interesting, in very much in correlation or alignment with what Kabir says. So I thought we could go over this and then share reflections. I'll just read it out once. Oh, my heart, let's go home. This world is a foreign land. Why do you wander here in strangers' clothes? These desires and earthly loves are alien, not your own. Infatuated with strangers, you forget the one your very own. Oh, my heart, let's go home. Climb the path of truth, O heart. Take a lamp of love to show the way. Take the wealth of virtue along. Guard this treasure well. Gatherings of true seekers are resting places on this road. If you fall in doubt, ask the way from one who walks on this road. The bandits of greed and delusion lie in wait to loot you on this path. Fend them off with the guards of stillness and restraint. If you see scary shapes and forms, take the name of that powerful king, the one who rules this road. Even death bows down to him. Oh, my heart, let's go home. So, this is by Ajoyo Dhyanath Prakashi from Bengal, and Vipul and Shabnam have translated it in English for all of us. So, let's take a pause and then we can share our reflections, whatever is coming to us. Yeah, so anyone who feels ready, uh, feel free to share. Yeah, Shweta.
It's very beautiful. I especially like the fourth paragraph. Everything is beautiful, but it's this fourth paragraph. Bandits of greed and delusion lie in wait to loot you on this path. Fend them off with the guards of stillness and restraint. So that's like really nice. And if you see scary shapes and forms, take the name of that powerful king. So I take it as like scary shapes and forms as fears, and I take it as that word like fears that take forms. So yeah, that's also very nice. Take the name of that powerful king, the one who rules this road. Even death bows down to him. Beautiful. Speaks of that stillness and restraint that is always your go-to, which always gives you that calmness and again guides you that inner voice. Yeah, very beautiful.
Often we think that we can only be still when something else gets fixed in external world. I think again and again, we, especially through the words of Mother and Sri Aurobindo also, we get to know that we can allow stillness to come. We don't have to wait for the external things to happen first in our own ways. Only then I will be peaceful or still. First, we can call the stillness and silence in the being, and then things fall into place.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
true.
Also, these lines that you stressed upon, this one, take the name of that powerful king, the one who rules this road. This reminds me of this little story from the Upanishads. I liked it very much. I'll share it shortly with you. So, there was some uh, kind of a war between the Devas and the Asuras. And the Devas won and they were celebrating. Maybe you have heard of it, some of you. So they were celebrating, and very excited, they were celebrating that, okay, we have won over the Asuras. And since nothing can happen without the divine or the Brahm, so the Brahm takes the form of a yaksha and he comes to their wherever they are having the party or the celebration. He stands outside the party palace and he says that I also want to go in because it's because of me that you have won. And the the guard or the caretaker outside, he says that it's only for the devas because devas have won the war and not you. Where do you come into picture? So then the guard tells the kind of the king Indra. He says that there is somebody else outside and he also wants to be the part of party because he says that I am also the winner. And so Indra sends Agni first, and Agni goes out and talks to the Yaksha and he says that I am Agni, I am the Jata Vedas, and it's because of me that everything kind of gets its power or fire. And then Yaksha says that, okay, show me your power. He places a tinka, like a jhadu tinka, in front of him, and he says, okay, burn this if you have the power. So he tries to burn it, and nothing happens. He's not able to burn that tinka. And then, disappointed, he goes inside. Then Indra sends Vayu, and Vayu again has this conversation with the Yaksha that it's because of me everything moves, and I make things go here and there. So Yaksha says that if you are the one who makes things go here and there, then take away this with your wind or the blow, this little tinka of jhadu that he has. So the wind or the Vayu, it tries again and fails. Nothing happens. It's not able to move that little grass away. So one by one, each deva, Indradev, also comes. So in the last, Indra comes because nobody is able to kind of really confront the Yaksha well. So Indra comes and Indra says that, oh my God, there is no one here. And then there is a lady standing there, and he talks to the lady that who was that fellow who was here and who was claiming that it's his victory. So then she explained in all the verses, Sanskrit verses, that it is because of him, the divine, the Brahm, that everything happens. It is because of him that the eyes are able to see. It is because of him that the wind is able to have the action. It is because of him that fire is able to burn. Otherwise, fire has no property by itself. It's because of the divine presence that makes it move and burn the things. So then slowly their arrogance comes down, and they realize that it's divine victory and it's not their victory. They were taking it on their ego. So this, this, the last three lines take the name of that powerful king, the one who rules this road. And it's amazing how in our arrogance we just keep on forgetting that it's not us who can see. There is a power that makes us see. There is a power that makes us hear. There is a power that makes us speak. Otherwise, a dead body has no power at all. And most of the times we are thinking that it's I who did it, I who did it. But where is the power in I coming from? So that is so obvious that we keep on forgetting. So again, kind of remembering. Kabir has talked a lot on Sumiran. Yeah. Yes, Shweta, what did you say?
Very true, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so please share if any more reflections on this song. We haven't really taken it up. Please feel free to share your reflections. And also this line, a stranger's clothes. This line is, I feel, very important. Why do you wander here in a stranger's clothes? So, what is it that he may be referring to here? Where do we feel like I'm not myself? And again, beautiful lines. These desires and earthly loves are alien, not your own. And no wonder that whenever we are running after our desires, it really makes us drained, and we get frustrated because it is not my true nature to run after desires. And that's why we suffer, get disappointed again and again. Yeah, so Lakshna, you want to share?
I just wanted to, I was wondering if you can hear me at all. There is something wrong with my phone.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
I just absolutely love these lines. I just love these lines which say gatherings of true seekers are resting places on the road. If you fail in doubt, ask the way from the one who walks on this road. I mean, this has always kind of, resonated so much with me. Ever since I was a kid, I would kind of seek people who would talk this talk. And, I feel this is what we call satsang, sacha saath, the saath who talks what you want to hear, this talk. And it's just so beautiful. It really is such a restful space, when you're listening to this, or or people are talking about this, or you are together with people, you know, who let's say are talking about this. And of course, we do have doubts, so many of us at all times. And like he beautifully says, ask the way from the one who walks on the road. And that I feel are the gurus, If you fail in doubt, ask the way. You just have to remember the guru. If you have a live guru, you just have to ask. And I feel that you find your way all over again. No matter how much doubt you have, no matter how many times you get lost. Even if you read the Guru's Vani, even there your answers are available. That's just how I felt about this. The beautiful lines. Thank you for choosing this book.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sulakshana. Absolutely. I think this is really a very powerful paragraph. The importance of Sat Sangat, as you were saying, and
Yes. And the
beautifully,
Guru.
yeah, they are indeed resting places on this road, you know. And absolutely, when we fall in doubt, we can ask the way from one who walks on this road. That's really very, very practically relevant for each one of us. In one of the couplets, again in the on the same lines, he says, Kabir sangat sadhu ki kate koti aparadh. So he start with ek ghadi आधी में पुनी आध. So no matter if you are able to spend a lot of time, a little time, or maybe a very, very little brief amount of time, एक घड़ी आधी में पुनी आध, Kabir Sangat Sadhu ki, Sadhak on the traveler on this path, Kate Koti Aparadh. So immediately your burdens are all lightened up, you know, and you are able to have a different view on the path. Maybe something was bothering, something was really overwhelming. And whenever we talk to seekers on the path, things are put into perspective and we are able to take it in our stride again, you know, whatever was overwhelming or bothering us. So that's absolutely very, very practically relevant.
So true. So true. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And also these lines, you know, the lines that I was wondering on, why do you wander here in a stranger's clothes? So it seems to us that whenever we are operating from the realm of ego, we suffer. Uh, it's a different thing that while we are growing up, a healthy ego has to be developed, and slowly, we kind of put it on the path of surrender. But since we are adults and we have a developed ego, and the path for us is now slowly to shed it off through the path of surrender. So we feel, and we all of us, I think, would resonate that whenever we are trapped in the game of me and my story, the ego game, me and my story, this happened to me, that happened to me, we suffer. So the covering or the cloth of the ego on us is a stranger's clothes. We don't feel ourselves there. We feel that something is wrong, something is missing. I'm not completely myself. This does not feel home. So I'm just wondering that maybe it's a reference to that. Why do you wander here in a stranger's clothes? These desires, these earthly loves are alien, not your own, and that is why they make us burn. You know, they really uh, kind of burn us with their heaviness. Infatuated with strangers, you forget the one, your very own. So we forget the truth of our being in lurking after all that is very attractive.
It is such an irony, no, that in this world, uh, I mean, personality, we focus so much on personality, building the personality, and then, connecting to different personality. And in that also, I think largely personality is like what is so superficial, and that is encouraged also.
Yeah,
It's such an irony.
yeah,
It's so much against what is true and what should be done, the
beautiful.
path to be taken.
Yeah. No, personality, if we go by the etymology of the word from Greek literature, so they say that it's coming from persona, and persona means a mask that one wears during the role plays or the theaters. And we never wonder about it that why would I wear a mask? You know, why should I wear a mask? What is uh, wrong with being naked and vulnerable? And slowly as we go ahead in our journeys, we realize that yes, you know, there is a beauty in being vulnerable and naked, and That's the beauty which is unique to each one of us, so that we don't have to fake any personality uh, which is not our own and appears alien. Also, the second line on the first two lines, "Oh my heart, let's go home. This world is a foreign land." This also reminds me of another couplet by Kabir. साजन रे मैं तोरे थाकी और बसूं विराने वास, काम करूं घर आपनो पर जिवड़ो तमीड़े पास. So she says, "Oh my beloved, I am made of your fabric. साजन रे मैं तोरे थाकी और बसूं विराने वास." And I found myself in some other alien land where I don't really find myself belonging. काम करूं घर आपनो. So how do I work here? I do my duties and whatever I have to do, the daily works, but my heart resides with you. So this parallel remembrance, which even many other masters also talk about, that you have to parallelly be in remembrance of the Lord, or this inner intimate connection with yourself, as you indulge in the drama or the world play. So this parallel consciousness is something which is very important. Again, in another Kabir songs, he says, just like a dancer who walks on these rope, this line which is connected to do, like two dandas are there and there is a rope and she's walking on the line. There also, I think it's from Mirabai or maybe Kabir, I can't remember now. So he says that just like that dancer who walks on the rope parallelly has the awareness of the rope and also does the dance while walking on the rope. That is how you must walk in this world. But unfortunately, or I don't know, maybe it's the path that we have to take, that we often are not parallelly there. We are just totally lost in the drama. And then what happens is suffering, and suffering brings us back home, and we realize that what is important, maybe I was just totally forgetting. And that's why I was suffering again and again. So this parallel consciousness is something which is, I think it's like a nurture to us. And also then we can put out that light which is available to us through that parallel consciousness in the worldly actions, which is very important. Otherwise we cannot leave the world ugly and have our own spiritual experiences. The world also has to transform and see the light of the divine. So yeah, that is there. Okay, so let's take up these two couplets. I just picked up the English version here. He is not found by sitting on your ass. I like the sentence. He is not found on a soft, warm bed. He is found by those who walk the path and weep for him. And then another one is Kabir's house is on a peak, and the path there is tricky. Even an ant's foot slips there. O mind, why load your bullock cart? So let us take a pause and reflect upon it, and then we can share. Yeah, so any sharings on the first one? This actually reminds me of three kinds. Yeah, Shweta, please go ahead. I'll share later. I was just filling up the
I
space.
I just wanted to say that this tells me about receptivity. Till you are receptive, you'll not find the divine. Yeah. So how much ever you think and be in your own small world, in your comfortable world, and you think, but you have to really seek and want the divine. That is what this paragraph tells me.
That's beautiful. Absolutely. Yeah. Again, on these lines only I wanted to share. So this reminded me of three types of egos that I heard at a few places. So the first one is the tamasic kind of ego, which does not even admit that there is something lacking. Very happy with the inertia, or maybe not happy, but not ready to admit that there is something lacking. And then there is the rajasic kind of the ego, where uh, there is a lack, the lack is felt, but the lack is tried, it is like again and again tried to fill up the lack through consumerism, by consuming the relationships, by consuming whatever can be consumed, thoughts, emotions, stories. So again, a lack is felt. So it's better than the tamasic state, because in tamasic state there is not even a cognizance of that something is missing. The lack is there, and hence there is no effort, inertia, full of inertia. And the rajasic thing, that yet I feel the lack, but let me complete it through consumerism, by consuming. And then comes the receptive state that you were referring to, which we call the sattvic ego, which admits that there is a lack that is felt in the being, and then it wants to fulfill it by listening to a guru, or the words of light, wisdom, and all that, or bhakti, devotion. But then when we see the trishul in Shiva's hand, it says that yes, the sattvic is a higher kind of a ego, in the sense that it allows you to listen to a guru and understand things better. But towards the kind of the higher journey, or the progressive journey, even the sattvic quality has to be let go of, because it keeps us trapped in the sense of incompletion still. That I am incomplete and there is something else which will fulfill me. Yeah, so it is again, and that's why we see the trishul in Shiva's hand, because with that trishul he kills all the three gunas, and he goes beyond the three gunas. So the ultimate fulfillment, or the transformation, or our true realization lies beyond all the gunas, although the gunas also have their specific purpose in our phases, different phases of life. Yeah, so that's just kind of got reminded of that. Yeah, please share if there are more reflections on the first couplet. And also this line where he says that on a soft warm bed, refers to our comforts. Nowadays in our lifestyles we give so much excessive importance to comfort and convenience, that we kill ourselves in that process. We make ourselves limited and confined to our comfort zones. So again, a kind of an invocation that not comfort is something that you may have in the life, but then if you really want to find, it's not in comfort that you will find. So going through all kinds of discomforts, uncomfortable situations, and allowing yourself to be challenged again and again, your boundaries to be challenged, he's found by those who walk the path and weep for him. So unless this longing occurs in the being, and longing has been given a very good importance by the masters, that uh, a being in which longing does not take place is as good as a dead being. You know, jis tan birhana upje, so tan jaan masan, says Bulle Shah, that it's as good as a dead body if you don't have a longing in your life for this fulfillment, because that is the path. So you have not even started the path if the longing does not arise in you. I think that's why suffering would come as a blessing then, because when we are in comfort zones and our own convenience and everything is, you know, like taken care of, then we don't care to seek. We don't care to seek, or we don't care for looking beyond the whatever ordinary is there in life. But then when we suffer, you know, when something happens in our life and suffering enters in our life, it's only then that I crave for a deeper and lasting contentment in the being. So where to find it, where to find it? And so suffering then comes as a blessing, all these events that allow suffering to enter into our life. Otherwise we don't care to seek something beyond the ordinary. Yes, Chiki ji. Yeah.
I think I can remember the story when Kunti Das the Pandav's mother, was when Krishnji was leaving. He asked her what she wanted, and she said this. She said, "Only give us suffering, because that's the only way we'll remember you." And actually, when we're looking outward, and we're still involved in the world, and it doesn't. We just stay that way. And truly, like you said, suffering is the only thing that makes us think, which is a blessing, and we don't think it is normally. But yeah, suffering is the only way, and that's the only time we weep for God. Otherwise, I mean, come on, we never think of God. And it's really the weeping for Him that draws Him, because, like my guru says, she says, if you keep your patra upside down, because there's all the blessings always being rained. They is being showered on you. Blessings are constantly being showered on you by the divine. But if you keep your vessel upside down, where are you going to collect it from? And this whole thing of keeping your vessel up, the right side up, is again grace. And it comes about by suffering or through a realized guru.
Yeah, beautiful. I think connects again with receptivity, you know, that if the container is turned upside down, there is no receptivity. I know the best. But then when we suffer, you know, we become more receptive and we are ready to listen, and again, work of grace only. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so let's go to the next couplet. In Hindi, it's Hindi or the other language. It says, कबीर का घर शिखर पे और सिल हली सी गैल. It's a very slippery path. वहां पाव टिके ना पपील का, क्यों मनवा ला दे बैल. सो वहां पे एक एंट का भी पैर नहीं टिकता. इट्स सच स्लिपरी स्लोप. And there on the peak, in extreme vigilance, I have found rest, he says. And he says that, "O mind, why do you load your bullock cart on this slippery slope where not even a light ant's foot can kind of really tread the path?" So let us reflect upon this, share reflections.
Does he mean to say that mind can never take you there? it's only the heart, the soul which we say.
I think again on the lines of what we were discussing yesterday, Shweta, that through the mind we'll never be able to understand the truth. As you are sharing, that the mind can never take you there, although there is a demand or yearning to taste that, but it's not through the mind that you would know. And the mind is loaded with all the opinions, beliefs, dogmas, and images and definitions, and with which we try to understand the divine.
So the path is tricky means that most of us think that through logic and reasoning we will reach the peak, but it takes so much more than that, and it's something that words cannot like define. Maybe it's a
So much
very
less, Shweta, I would
yeah,
say so much less. We
so
don't
much
need
less. Yeah,
all the logic and reason there. Yeah.
true, true. So what would this mean? Even an ant's foot slips there. So somebody who's, I don't know, I can't find an analogy or a direct explanation of this. What would that mean?
So metaphorically, I would say he wants to say that the path is so narrow and tricky and also slippery, that even an ant is something which is very very light, like it can just go anywhere, and you cannot imagine and the ant can go there, right? But even an ant's foot slips there. So how can you with your loaded up mind imagine to walk on that path? Yes, Chikiji, you want to share?
Actually, yeah, we need to offload so much. And I really believe the one way to do it is, this surrender, surrender and patience. We want to do everything in our own time. It has to be done there, otherwise, all our signals go off and we start going absolutely rabid. We've stopped flowing with life. We've actually forgotten that there is a power that, dictates everything. Like even the last drop of water that you drink in a day, or if you get a meal or don't get a meal, is really all by the grace of God. And but we don't ever look at it that way. It's like if I'm hungry and I don't get my food, I'll start biting whoever it is that comes along and says any half a word to me, and I'm, down their throat. And we don't accept that it is by God's dispensation that we get anything, even the last drop of water that we drink. I mean, there are so many times when we go out, and we're really thirsty and we don't get water. You can't find a shop, you can't buy water, there isn't a nalka, there isn't, and we forget at that point of time that maybe we aren't meant to get water at that time. And crying for God is, I think, the only option we have, and other than the fact that, we need to flow with life and take life as it comes and stop wanting it our way. I mean, deal the best we can with whatever it is that's there in front of us, really. Just a thought.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. There's another story that I'm reminded of after Chikiji's sharing. There is one sadhu who comes to a village, and he begins to, like, he wants to stay maybe in the village, and the villagers come to him and they ask him, okay, where have you come from? So his answer is that I have come from the same mother from where you have come from. And then they realize that it must be some realized hermit or master, and they allow him, like, ask him, request him that please stay with us, and as long as you want you can stay in this village. So that sadhu started to stay in that village, and everybody listens to him and goes to him for advice and everything, and very happy to have him there. So once in that village, something strange series of events begin to happen. and like all the dogs in that village, they start to run away from the village. So there is no dog left in that village anymore. So whenever a thief would come, the dogs are not there to jagao the villagers. So they are very worried that what is this happening, and they go to the sage and they ask him that what is this happening, there are no dogs, how would we get to know that if there are any robbers or thieves or anything? So he says that maybe this is for some good, wait, why don't you wait? So they think that okay, we respect the fellow and he knows the best, so let us wait. And then after some days, another thing happens, that all the fire in that village with which they cook, and their chulas, all the fire goes away. Even the fire in Sadhu's Havan Kund also goes away. So there is no fire left in that village. And they go to the Sadhu again, and he says that maybe something good, maybe something good will happen. It cannot be that this is not for a reason. So again they listen, but they are a bit in doubt, that what good can happen, we will not have food to eat these days where we don't have the fire. So he says, why don't you go without food, fast for a day, doesn't matter, just see, maybe something is to happen. And then what happens, that there are two villagers who are walking through the outskirts of the village, and they see that there is a lot of dust, like a dust storm coming forward, and they kind of hide themselves in the corner. They see that there are troops from some king who is one by one, who is just kind of capturing the villages. Troops from that king are coming, and one of the horsemen, other one, they are talking to each other, and one of them says, this is a good place, maybe we can ask our king to capture this next. And the other one says, no, 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 don't you know that there are no dogs that bark here, it is as good as a dead village, and there is no smoke that you can see of food cooking and anything, so it's a dead village, and we should maybe look for some other village and go and capture those villages. So and hence the village is saved by that capture. So these villagers are very happy now, and they know that there was something of wisdom that the sage was talking, but then the sage had moved on, they could not find the sage there, maybe he moved on to some other place now, his work was done in the village. So again, reminding me of what Chikiji was sharing, that there is always a higher plan, but we are so stuck in our plans. Why does it not move according to me? That the resistance that brings up in the being, owing to not in the flow of the events, as you were sharing, that whatever is there, I am resisting it. Whatever happens, I am resisting it. So if this resistance can be understood and looked upon, I think there is a lot of relief, first of all, from suffering that we get, and also there is a chance that we go one with the flow, become one with the flow, and are able to enjoy or rejoice the life as it is, and not wanting to turn it my way or this way or that way, because that really creates a lot of suffering.
But I think, if I may say, like Chikiji very correctly, very, very correctly said, that it is grace. It is grace by which everything happens. And like Ramana Maharishi said, it is only by grace that we even think of God. So grace is always there. So very correctly, whoever said that as long as our vessel is upturned, we are not willing to receive the grace. But the grace is always there. It might come through the Guru, it might come through Satsangat, it'll come any which way if you just are ready to receive. That's all. And for that, there has to be absolutely deep yearning, heartfelt yearning. Like they say, bas tu hi tu, tu hi tu, tu hi tu. Like that so many times I tell my children that we always sing this arti, Tera tujhko saunp ke kya lage hai mera. And yet we say it all the time, but we don't really believe it. Because when it comes to not just material goods, even relationships or anything, we always say mera hai. To identify is fine, But to have the feeling of ownership is totally different. So maybe I'm going a little off track, but this is just what I wanted to say, that even thinking like this, or even having come to this kind of a forum where I'm listening to this, I think this is the grace of the Lord. And I'm so grateful. That's just what I wanted to share.
Totally resonate. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, I was reading something from the Upanishad today. I'll read these lines with you. And they were so very powerful. And just what you shared, that even, Tinka, if Tinka moves, it's not without Grace's direction that it can move. So if you are thinking of the Lord or longing for the Lord, that longing itself is the sign that Lord is there, because it's grace that makes that longing happen. So absolutely, absolutely resonate. And it's a beauty that no matter if through suffering and pain, but at least you are thinking of God now. I think it's absolute grace. Even suffering then appears like grace. So let me just bring this lines. Yeah, in the meantime, if there is any sharing, please unmute and share. Yeah, so I'm just reading this little story, not complete story, but the story I already told you, that Yaksha and Indra Sambad, it said. So it's by in Kena Upanishad. Huh? So I'll just read a few lines which makes a bit of sense here to me. Urged on by whom does the mind fly? Harnessed by whom does breath move the first? By whom is urged on the speech that folk utter? And which God harnesses the eye and ear? And then he says, knowing that it is the ear of the ear, the mind of the mind, the speech of the speech, the breath of the breath, the eye of the eye, the wise renounce, and when they leave this world, become immortal. So again, referring to, who looks through these eyes, who talks through the speech, who listens through the ears, who senses through the touch. And this is so obvious, so obvious, that we completely forget that it is right here with us 24/7 that the divine presence is there. And that is what Yaksha was trying to make the gods understand, that you think that you have the power. Who gives you power? What makes the fire burn? What makes the wind blow away things? What makes you win and win over the asuras? And that's where the arrogance it is put to the ground, that without grace's direction or this sanket, without grace being there, nothing can happen. So even if one may be going through the suffering, but what allows you to long in the suffering is God's love or grace only. So again, a beauty, and paradoxical, because when we talk of suffering, often we see that, oh my God, why is the world suffering? But when we see this beauty, then it comes out really in a very interesting aspect, that wow, thank God that we are suffering. Otherwise, as Chikiji and Sulakshna ji were sharing, we will never think of God or the divine or the ultimate fulfillment in our comfort zones. Again, what one does not hear by the ear, by which the ear is heard, know that as Brahman. What one does not breathe by the breath, by which the breath is breathed, know that as Brahman. So that which allows the breath to be, but is more than the breath. That which allows the eyes to see, but is more than the eyes. So I thought this was really, truly very, very powerful. I thought I'll share this with you. And then he says, the one who thinks that he has got it I'm not with that one. This is also very hilarious and beautiful again. So he says, it is the Brahman or the divine. It is thought of by the one to whom it is unthought. The one by whom it is thought of, he does not know it. So if I think that I have understood, I have not understood. And if I know that I have not understood, then he says, then I'm there. It is understood by those who do not understand. It is thought of when it is realized by awakening to it. So one finds immortality. So you can just kind of, again, these words, one can just lose oneself in these words or where the words are trying to take us. Because whenever we want to express it out, words are only pointers. We cannot truly express what is the true experience, the practical experience. Yes, Chikiji.
I'm not sure whether this was Ramana Maharishi or it was Nisargadatta Maharaj. But one of them said that, you have to arrive at a space where you know nothing. Because it's just what you're saying just now, is like, as long as I think I know, as long as I think I've arrived, I haven't arrived. If I think I know, actually I don't know. And I know one of these masters said that you have to know that you know nothing. It's only then are you even getting somewhere close to anything.
I think this was Nisargadatta Maharaj.
Very possible, very possible.
Yeah. It's very, one can actually, what you shared, it appears very interesting because, so one can say that maybe there is a pencil in my hand and I know the pencil, I know the pencil. And even if we go here, which looks very limited, now we are talking of the divine who is an infinite, so how can we ever say that I know the divine, I know it? Anyway, even if we talk of this pencil, which is very limited, if we look at it, and we see that if we really try to go closer to the pencil itself, which is very limited in appearance, we see that there is much in the pencil which we do not know. If we go to the level of atoms, protons, neutrons, and electrons, we don't know the mystery there. So how can I ever claim that I know that? Again, that is full of kind of what we say deception. It's very deceptive in nature to say that I know what it is. And may the grace keep us away from that arrogance, and may it keep us
This
on the path. Yeah.
knowing and not knowing, this thing about knowing, whoever says they know don't really know. It reminds me of just a two-line couplet, a sher I heard long time back, and it stayed with me. And it says, किससे पूछें पता तेरा ए खुदा, जिसको खबर थी तेरी वो बेखबर मिला. I mean, anybody who's actually evolved or reached have very little to say. They might guide you whichever way, but they've really never said that we know God. Like all our evolved masters I've seen, none of them have really ever said anything like that. That's just what I remembered.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. And yet they have transformed so many of us through their loving and compassionate touch. The love that
Yes.
goes through them. Yeah.
Oh, so true.
Beautiful. So let us take up this last song that I have for today. It's in Hindi, it's मैं मेरा घर जाड़िया लिया पलीता हाथ जो जारो घर आपना चले हमारे साथ. So Kabir says, I burnt down my house and I took up this flaming torch in my hand. If you are ready to scorch your own house, then join me on this path or the walk. Then there is a refrain that comes up, Ram ras meetho ghano piye amar hoi jaye. The drink of Ram is incredibly sweet. One who drinks never dies. Scorch the house to make a house arise. So don't try to save yourself, preserve yourself. Let it burn. Let all burn that wants to get burned. Scorch the house to make a house arise. Protect it and it is gone. So the more you try to preserve yourself, the more you are away from your truth. Protect it and it's gone. I saw a miraculous sight, a dead man eating up time. So usually how it happens in life is that we are eaten up by time slowly. But he says that the moment I am dead to all that I need to be dead to, my desires, all the expectations, demands, a dead man eating up time. Now I can enjoy the time. A fire blazes ahead, in its wake, greenery thrives. I am devoted to that tree. Cut the root and the fruit revives. Dhruv drank, Prahlad drank, Kabir too is drinking, thirsty to drink again and again. So it's so sweet, the nectar is so sweet that I have drank enough, but I still want to have more and more and more and more. Yeah, so yeah, let's take a pause and share reflections. Also, if some of you would like to share on what would be mean by the house, what does house signify here? I burned down my house, and if you are ready to scorch your house, yeah, yes, Shweta, please.
I feel,
Ego, I think.
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Shweta.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I was saying the same thing. Ego, yeah.
Yes, so house usually signifies a walled, protected space, where I feel I'm safe. So all these zones in which I think that I am preserving myself, although I'm not preserving anything but the ego, the self images, the identities, the labels that I have for me, where I feel that, okay, now I am preserved, nothing can happen to me. But unfortunately, it's not our truth. Ego is not our truth. That's not who I am. So I am protecting something which I am not. I'm protecting a falsehood. Yeah. And that's why it's very, very important to keep on burning all the images we have about ourselves. Let everything burn. And it's painful, it hurts when images are burned, because we are so identified with those images and definitions about ourselves that it hurts. So it's good to go through that hurt. It's an auspicious hurt, which all of us must go through if we are to find out our truth and essence. Yeah. So please feel free to share more on these lines.
Ma says we're very fortunate to be given a human body. And since we've been given it, our foremost duty is to actually find God. And all of us do anything but do that. We get involved with family, we get involved with our careers, we get involved with X, Y, Z, and everything else. But she actually says our only and foremost duty is to find God. And I think Kabir is normally always taking us to that, is to find God, burn up everything. Are you ready to follow me? And he keeps coming back to that over and over and over again. It's like, break your shackles and look for what's deeper and higher.
Beautiful, beautiful. There is this line I'll share on what Chikiji you just shared, just adding on to that. The Upanishads say, man becomes true if in this life he can apprehend God. If not, it is the greatest calamity for him. And again, suffering is brought into picture because we are not doing the job we were meant to do after taking this human birth. So yeah, I think it's looks like a win-win situation that if I suffer, it's actually really good because it reminds me that I have maybe strayed from the path which I chose for myself, or this path we chose for ourselves, but we forgotten. And Kabir also talks about jag, jag, jag. What you came here for and what are you doing. But what you got involved with. So that's really beautiful. Yeah. Through all his couplets, he just absolutely reminds us of that again and again, again and again, through different metaphors, different hints and clues. Yeah. Yeah, please share more if anything.
I think suffering also cleanses us, you know, and it depends on the attitude we take it with, that it actually is also cleansing us, because none of us know what we've done in all our past lives, which is why it's called suffering, because we don't know what we've done. If we knew what we've done, we would have probably, we'll try and correct it, but we don't, because we come in with Maya and it is meant for us to forget. But again, I think suffering somewhere also cleanses us. We're also then, it's again an attitude that one can take of making it easier. Something is being also removed from us, something negative that we've done, obviously something not nice. And it really also cleanses us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Monica, can you explain the second paragraph to me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So scorch the house to make a house arise. Protect it and it is gone. I saw a miraculous sight, a dead man eating up time. So to me, it appears that what I consider myself to be, I am not. All these images about myself, all these images from others, what others are thinking of me, I put it on myself and I begin to believe that this is me, and this is what I have to protect. So I begin to protect me and my story and my images and my definitions, what I am carrying or what other people have given me, what society may have given me, what my loved ones may have given me. And in trying to live up to those images, I lose myself. To scorch the house wherever I am keeping myself protected in those images, trying to live up to those images, I have to burn them all, I have to let them to ashes. Only then the house can arise. So the true me, the true individuality, if one can say, or the beauty of our uniqueness, only then can shine forth, when all the falsehood that I have been carrying, thinking that it is myself, all that is burnt to ashes. Protect it and it is gone. So the more I keep on protecting those images about myself, what I think of myself, what others think of myself, all the stories that I think that I am, the more I protect them, the more I am away from my truth, because I am protecting the falsehood. I am thinking that this is me, this is me. And that keeps me away from my truth. Yeah. And then he says, I saw a miraculous sight, a dead man eating up time. So now I am dead to my images. I am dead to my desires. I am dead to my greed, lust, all that kills the man, I would say, kills our uniqueness and beauty. So once being dead to that, the life that you get, the life that you live with this flow of life, everything appears like a prasad. So you are able to now enjoy time. You are now able to have, each day is very unique, very special. Each moment is very special. So you're not killed by time or eaten up by time, where you were trying to earlier live up to those images, rushing hard in this race. Now being nothing and nobody, you are truly yourself, and now you can relish time. So this is how I see it. But if people have more reflections, please share.
Thank you.
So these the paragraph, last paragraph, again a few lines which I feel very, very important. I am devoted to that tree, cut the root and fruit revives. So I see this as we kind of, we anchor ourselves in several places. We make our sense of worth through those places where we anchor ourselves. It may be a particular type of a spiritual path, it may be a particular type of a family, any identity, anything, anything that I stick on to for my identity. I have to keep on cutting those roots wherever I anchor myself, because that becomes a part of my identity. And then I'll be trying to preserve it, that, oh my god, if this is gone, what will happen to me? And the more we cut these roots, wherever we get anchored, wherever we get identified with that, okay, if this is not there, I am no one. If this is not there, I am nothing. So we place our identity or sense of worth on things, people, situations, and all that, identities, definitions. And we have to keep on cutting these roots wherever we anchor ourselves. Only then the fruit, our uniqueness, our truth, only then that we are absolutely naked and true to ourselves. So this I find very, very powerful here, that no need to anchor or get identified yourself to anything at all. Not your name, not your family, not a guru, not a master, not the path, not a seeker. So although we may call ourselves a seeker, but one is, so the seeker, there is no identity coming from being a seeker that I am enjoying. Because wherever I get stuck in any identity where I get rooted, I kill my uniqueness there. I kill my truth there. So yeah, that's this. Yeah, anything more? Anyone? Okay, so in absence of any comments, or in your presence, absent presence, it's amazing how presence and absence are absolutely related. The more absent we are, the more present we are. So I think we can call it a day. Yes, Shweta? Yeah.
Oh, no, no, I was just laughing. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah. It's
So
beautiful.
thanks for joining, everyone. Thank you for sharing and connecting.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you,
Thank
Monica
you.
ji.
Thank you. Thanks, Chitra. Bye-bye.
beautiful.